Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming this morning. A warm welcome back to the IPA Big Breakfast. It is amazing to have you here as we bring together printers, agencies, buyers, and suppliers all in one place to stimulate economic activity for our sector and hopefully leave you all with new ideas. Now, as you may have noticed, this morning I'm presenting from home. My whole family has some form of lurgy, thankfully not COVID, so we're just here trying to stop spreading that to other people. Now, the Big Breakfast is all about making new connections and expanding your business network. So, when we get back to the diner after the presentation in 10 minutes, keep moving around the tables and meeting new people. My name is Brennan Perring, and I am the General Manager of the Independent Print Industries Association that hosts this event. Now, before I welcome our illustrious speaker to the Freshly Juiced stage, we want to thank our incredible sponsor, Antalis, who has enabled us to make this session free for you to attend. Antalis is passionate about stimulating the ongoing renaissance for print, and so have launched the Creative Power Awards. For all those designers and printers out there, through your ideas and expertise, you give character and personality to paper, creating desire, raising awareness, and generating impact. It's important to Antalis to honor and praise you, your creative thinking, and your work. So in partnership with the brand identity, the Antalis Creative Power Awards is the opportunity to celebrate your creative excellence applied to or in combination with its very high quality papers. Its expert jury will assess the entered projects according to 8 award categories, and all winners will attain instant industry recognition and benefit from extensive media coverage, including articles and interviews with the brand identity. Whether you are graphic designers, communication agencies, printers, or end users, if you're a supplier and know of a fantastic customer of yours who is a printer, get them involved. Antalis hope to receive your most beautiful projects completed throughout 2021 and up to May 31st, 2022. Come on, it's your time to shine, so good luck, and you can find out more at the link that I'm about to put into the chat box right now. There you go. It's in there for you now. Okay, so we are often told what type of leader we should be and why we should be that way. However, what is less clear is how to become that leader. So to answer just that, it is my very great pleasure to welcome our Freshly Juiced speaker, Peter Docker, to the stage now. Peter spent 25 years in the Royal Air Force. He is a former igniter at Simon Sinek Incorporated, author of celebrated title Find Your Why, and has spent more than 14 years partnering with businesses around the world. He has now launched his new book, Leading from the Jump Seat, and the first 40 of you that made it into the Big Breakfast this morning will be sent a free printed copy. Now, if you have any questions for Peter during his presentation, please pop them in the chat and I will ask them for you afterwards. So Peter, with that, it is now over to you.
Well, good morning, Brennan. Thank you for that fantastic introduction, and hello everybody on the floor there of IPIA. Wonderful to be a part of your company again, be in your company. It's been a little while and it's lovely to come back. So I've got my tea because this is the Big Breakfast. And I want to start by sharing with you, last week was quite a big week for my family. My brother Paul, for a start off, my older brother Paul, after 45 years of working for the same company, a jewelry company, he retired. And I'm delighted for him as he starts off on a new part of his life. Coincidentally, my daughter Louise, she left her job working for a big consultancy, and she's about to start another part of her life where she's going to cycle around Vietnam, Cambodia, Australia, and New Zealand for about 10 or 12 months and build businesses at the same time. And also my son Patrick, he's just entered the final phase after about 6 years of training as a Royal Navy pilot. And he will be saying goodbye to his instructors as he goes to his frontline squadron. Now, yes, I'm obviously proud of all of my family members I've mentioned there, but the point of sharing that with you is that at some point we all hand over control. It's absolutely inevitable, you know, whether we're the CEO of a business, leader of a team, or ultimately we retire, or actually our kids grow up, leave home and start leading their own lives. At some stage, we all hand over that control. And that's what leading from the jump seat is all about. Because you see, if we embrace that inevitability, then it creates extraordinary opportunities. And the way we embrace it is by, well, focusing on lifting our people up and preparing them so that when the time is right, they can take control. I have to say, just going back to my brother, I saw the video of his retirement party. I wasn't able to join myself, but there he was, surrounded by the whole company that could get there and people who worked for him directly. And it was just wonderful to hear how they felt about him as a manager and as a leader, because actually, without my brother knowing, he was being a jump seat leader. He's lifting them up. And now that he's left, his people are prepared and able to carry forward those things that have been deeply important to him. The really important thing is that it has fantastic results in the present too. You know, during my time, my brother was voted as the top manager. His sector was the most profitable of the whole company. You know, so leading from the jump seat has got huge benefits. It's not just about legacy. It's about right here, right now, and the performance that you get. So very briefly, there are 3 practices of jump seat leadership. There's commitment, humble confidence, and belonging. But in the short spot, I'm just going to focus on the belonging side. That's what I'm going to draw on. And actually, I'm talking about handing over control, but one of the biggest challenges many of us have is knowing, well, when to step back in. When, well, it's where we struggle, when we've handed over that control and we sense that we really need to step back in and take control. At what point do we do that? And more importantly, how do we do it? So we don't end up destroying someone's confidence or, well, taking away everything we've been building up with our future leaders. To share that idea, I'm going to tell you a story. I love stories, and this one goes back to my flying days. And I was a senior officer and a pilot in the Royal Air Force, flying big passenger jets. And on this one occasion, we were flying into Gander, Newfoundland. And actually, it was my junior co-pilot with me, the first officer who was flying. Let's call him John. And he was doing okay. He was well trained, but he wasn't that experienced. But here's the thing. When you're flying into airports like Gander, which, well, the weather wasn't that great that day, you have to give the other pilot the opportunity to fly, because otherwise they'll never learn. And so that's what I had done. And Gary was flying the approach. It all seemed to be going fine initially. And when you're flying an approach to a runway, a big airport, you have what are called the precision approach indicators. And I'll just show you a slide of those. These are 4 lights to the side of the runway. This is a night view because it's so much easier to see what the runway looks like and see these lights at night. And these 4 lights, what's special about them is that they can shine either red or white. When they're showing, as they are now, 2 red and 2 white, that means that you are on the correct glide slope, the correct angle of your approach to land safely. However, when they turn to 3 white lights, you are too high. If, however, it goes down to 3 red lights and 1 white, you are too low. And if you get to the situation where there are 4 red lights, you are way too low. And the consequences of that is that you could hit an obstacle or something, some terrain, on the approach into the airfield. So there was John, he was flying, and initially we had 2 red lights, 2 white, all good. But then we started to get to the situation where we had 3 red lights and only 1 white. In other words, we were going a little bit low on the approach. So I called it out, which was my job. I would say low on the approach. And the other pilot, John, should have acknowledged that, which he did, but then he should have put a bit more power on the engines, and that would have been the corrective action to put us back onto that correct glide slope. But he didn't. So I left it a little bit longer, and then I started to see 4 red lights. In other words, we were going way too low, and there was danger to the aircraft. So I called it out again. I said, co-pilot, below the approach. He acknowledged, but again, he didn't take any corrective action. But even then, I didn't take over. What I did was just reached over to the throttles of the engines and pushed them forward a little bit, saying out loud what I was doing as I did it. That gave us the bit more power we needed. We got back onto the correct glide slope. We had 2 red, 2 white lights, and John landed the aircraft perfectly with no further incident. So what do we learn from that? Or what do I take from that? Well, when we're trying to decide when to hand over or take over control, then there are some really good pointers to help us identify that point, that decision point. Because, you know, if we take over control too early, we will prick the balloon of confidence of the person for whom we're taking that control after perhaps months or even years of building them up to that stage. So the first question is recognize that the urge to take back control, to step in, it is going to happen. You know, that's inevitable. You will feel that because chances are you'll sense that your livelihood, your status, the reputation of your company is on the line, or in my case, maybe your life as well, you know. So recognize it's going to happen, because when you recognize that, it enables you to be prepared for it. Then the second thing, are you being driven by love, or are you being driven by fear? You know, everything that we do in life that's important to us is driven by those 2 things. It's either driven by fear or it's driven by love. You know, if it's driven by fear, then we tend to close down and start thinking about ourselves and making decisions based on scarcity and, well, we've got to win and it's all about me. Often ego can show up there too. But when we sense that fear, we have a choice to sort ourselves from a place of love. And what love looks like in a business context is, well, seeing the world as a place of opportunity, thinking of our people and the customers we serve, not just about ourselves and perhaps our own ego. You know, we lead with humble confidence. So next time you feel the urge to step back in and take control, ask yourself, where am I sourcing myself from? Is it from fear? Is it all about me? Or is it from love? Is it in service of the greater good? And that takes me to the next pointer, which is it the time to choose the many over the one? And any Star Trek fans out there might recognize that as a bit of a Spock quote, you know. But just as was the case with me in that aircraft, I had to step into a little degree because the needs of the 140 people on board and their safety became even more important than the needs of the one, in this case, John, the pilot flying the aircraft. So that is a good question to ask yourself. And then we have this, so important. What is your 4 red lights moment? What is your decision point? Obviously, I'm referring back to the 4 red lights of on the approach to the runway, but it's the same for all of us in life and in business. What is your decision points? The 4 red lights moments is the point beyond which, if you allow the situation to develop, you're not going to be able to recover it. You're not going to have the skill or ability to recover that situation. So understanding what your 4 red lights moment is, that last point at which you can intervene and correct the situation, is so important, because you need to allow the situation to continue until that point. And then choose the smallest intervention. If you're going to take back control, do the minimum that you absolutely need to do, consistent with the other points already on the screen. So if you recall in my story, I didn't fully take control of the aircraft. All I did was reach over to the power and push the power on the engines forward a little bit, which was what we needed. I still left control largely to John so as he could sort out the situation. That meant that I didn't prick his balloon of confidence. You know, he landed the aircraft safety. We had a great debrief afterwards. He learned from his mistake and he went on to do well. So when we are going to take a step back in, do the minimum you absolutely need to do. And that brings me to the last point. Ask yourself, does the outcome, does it really matter? You know, sometimes we can be eager to step back in, but asking ourselves on this occasion, does it really matter? You know, 90% of the time, it really doesn't. By the end of the day, next week, next month, the outcome isn't really going to matter that much. So see it instead as the opportunity for the other person to learn and to grow, and for them too to eventually be able to step up and be the leader. There is what I love about the story is that there's a PS to it. About 4 years ago, when my son was in the early part of his training as a pilot, he came home one weekend to see me. He said, "Hey, Dad," he said, "I was up at RAF Cranwell doing some training, and there was an instructor up there who remembers you." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." And he told me who it was. It turned out it was 4 Red Lights John, the guy who was flying that aircraft into Gander with me that day. And John had gone on to become a qualified flying instructor. He'd done very well. And there was he now, many years later, helping to teach my son how to fly. This is the opportunity that opens up when we know our 4 red lights moment, when, yes, we've handed over control, and we also have a mechanism by which we know when and how to step back in and take back control. So that's all I have for you today. It was just a short burst, but I hope you got something from that. It's all drawn from the practice of jumpsuit leadership called belonging. And I'd be delighted now to answer any questions for a few minutes if you have them. If not, that's okay too. But Brendan, welcome back to the stage.
Thank you so much.
What's your 4 red lights moment?
Oh, too many of them to say on a daily basis, Peter. I work in the print industry. Most of us operate on 4 red lights at all days. So we have a question from Jamie Walsh, who is from one of our wonderful and supportive members, Solimar Systems. He asked, what was John's reason for not acting when needed?
Oh, I like that. You know, I think this is a really good question, because what happened to John in that moment, I think we see happening in business quite often. If we're lifting people up, that by definition means that we're pushing them forward in terms of, well, creating the space that they can step into so they can grow and develop. And quite often that means that they are feeling confident to push the boundaries of their comfort zone. And that's great. That's how we all grow and develop. But what comes along with that is sometimes we can get overwhelmed. We can become the person who's in that situation where we've got so many inputs and we're right on the edge of our comfort zone, we get overloaded. And that's what happened to John. You know, he could hear what I was saying, he acknowledged it, but he was focusing so hard on flying the aeroplane in what were quite gusty and turbulent conditions. He didn't have the capacity to take the corrective action that was needed. Not on that stage anyway, not on that flight, but he did learn how to do that later. So really good question, because I think this occurs a lot in business too, not just on airplanes.
Fantastic. So we've got another question that has come in, and just to remind everyone, After we finish the question and answer session with Peter, we'll resume the networking, which will go on till about 10:15. So we have a question from Lucy Swanston, who's from another lovely IPA member, Nutshell. She's asked, do you have to have a natural ability to lead with love than fear, or is this something that can be learned? So can you lead to, do you have to have a natural ability, or can it be learned?
I think we all have the capacity. Absolutely. As human beings, we all have the capacity to be driven from love, all of us. It's just that we might not characterize it like that. But, you know, when we do something for our friends or our family or whatever, that comes from a place of love, not from a place of fear. I think the great opportunity is to recognize that fear comes to us all. You know, fear is triggered when we sense our life, our livelihood, our status, or our reputation is on the line. And if it's our life, then, well, you know, like the oncoming car that we didn't see, we jump out the way, and that's good. The opportunity in business, particularly, because generally our life is not on the line, the opportunity in business is to recognize that fear is triggered by a threat to our livelihood, status, or reputation. And then not to react to that fear, but to recognize it as a warning flag. And when we see that warning flag go up, recognize too that we always have a choice. We always have that choice to source ourselves from a place of love, where instead of scarcity, we're seeing the world as a place of opportunity. Yeah, instead of ego, we're leading with humble confidence. And when I say we always have a choice, I refer to the stories of Malala Yousafzai, for example, who was shot in the head by the Taliban. You know, she recovered. Now, it would have been very easy for her to then source herself from a place of fear, yeah, particularly with regards to the people who were threatening her. But no, she chose to lead herself from a place of love. Or Nelson Mandela, when he had nothing, when he was locked up for so many years, he had nothing, and he could have chosen fear. But no, he chose love. And in fact, he got many of his guards that were guarding him over those years completely, well, enthralled and inspired by his words and his wisdom. So no matter the situation, we always have that choice. And in the book, there's a great story of one of our own industries here, Spectrum Plastics, and the choices they faced some years ago when they lost about 70 or 80% of their revenue overnight. So we always have a choice. Some people naturally lean towards love than others. You know, it's the the glass half full, half empty type syndrome, you know. But the opportunity, if we take a moment to reflect, we can learn and guide ourselves from love rather than from fear.
Yeah, that is a fantastic story in the book. Kath Duran from Spectrum Printed Plastics, a previous chair of the IPA. So everyone's going to be getting a book, so make sure to read that. So last question before we head back to the networking is two things. What are you working on next, Peter? And, you know, in the book, you illustrate many of your leadership techniques through stories drawn from different industries and companies, big, small. But quite a few others involve you dealing with some kind of emergency on an aircraft. So my question is it really safe to fly with you?
Yeah, I've actually been asked that quite a few times. Well, you know, I'm still here, aren't I? So that's got to be good. I no longer have my hands on the controls, although I did say to one of my team colleagues over in the States who was trying to think of stories to illustrate his own talks and whatever. I said, well, you know, if you're short of a few, let's hire an aeroplane and we'll go flying together. I'm sure one or two will crop up. Yeah, I sit mainly down the back of aeroplanes these days. I've handed over my flying gloves to my son Patrick, who already I think is a much better pilot than I ever was, which is wonderful to see. What am I working on at the moment? Actually, I'm working exceptionally hard at building a course to teach leading from the jump seat. I already provide workshops and teach in person, but you know, that's limiting. That's down to me being able to be there. So what this course is about is putting everything around jump seat leadership into a package. There'll be lots of videos, there'll be case studies, including ones around space and Apollo 13, which any company that has facilitators or people who are used to doing just chairing meetings will be able to access and use the course to teach everyone in their organization how to lead from the jump seat. So that's what's focusing my attention at the moment.
Lovely. Well, Peter, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a really amazing talk. It's been lovely chatting with you. I hope everyone got a lot out of that. Let's go back to the networking now. Let's continue these conversations. Let's create new business for our industry. And please do check out the banner on the right-hand side of the floor plan to find out more about Antalis's new award scheme and also all about Peter and his organization. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you.